terms of leadership aspirations, my aspirations are really just to remain humble and to keep developing in as many different ways as possible. I view the Aspiring Principals Leadership Academy as a nice opportunity for that, to learn from other leaders that are doing some of the same things that I'm doing, but also learn from some experienced former administrators in numerous roles at Oakland County Schools. So that's kind of why I'm most excited for this opportunity. In terms of why I'm interested in principalship, I would say that I became a teacher because I saw the power that great teachers can have on individual students, and I was completely convinced that I was going to be a teacher for 30 years. Well, after seeing what great administrators, great principals can do to empower teachers, to really make them want to make that change in the students' lives, I became interested in principalship from that. As Birmingham Public Schools representative for the Aspiring Principals Leadership Academy, if you were to speak to representatives from the other Oakland County schools and from the leaders at Oakland County schools that were running this event, I would say that they describe me as somebody that's very eager to learn. I love developing myself as a leader, seeing these new experiences for which I can draw meaning from. I love collaborating with other people that have these experiences. I love hearing them share and getting to brainstorm possible, ideas that I would have from it. I would also say that they would describe me as somebody that has interesting experiences of my own. And at that same time, I think that's something that goes back to me being Birmingham Public Schools representative. I I'm currently in Finland, obviously, and before that, I visited Ghana with a program called Teachers for Global Classrooms. I think it's very powerful as Birmingham's representative that I can share these experiences, and it really shows that our district is serious about putting leaders forward that have experiences with some of the things that we speak about in our strategic plan, like learning, collaboration, and things of that nature. Um, they'll also describe me as somebody that has a lot of enthusiasm, and with that, I'm just somebody that they enjoy working with. I I love being an educator. I love being a leader. I and like I said, I just overall really enjoy learning and developing meaning from new experiences. Good principal is someone that's empathetic, intelligent, and has a clear vision of what they want the school to be. They work hard to develop an environment that is conducive for learning for the students, but also allows the teachers to teach as highly effectively as possible. Now, what I would say the difference between a good principal and an exemplary principal, I always go back to the Thomas Jefferson quote, the genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Um, if you think you're going to get somewhere far just by being more intelligent than other people, usually that's where people fail and become extremely humbled. Um, there's some very intelligent principals, but some of them, a good portion of them even, don't reach exemplary status because they underestimate just how difficult some of the tasks are going to be. Um, the greatest principals are the ones that are willing to do the extras. I kind of had this epiphany. Well, I was reading this achievement gap study. I spent about 6 months doing one of my larger research projects on the achievement gap and what administrators do to solve the achievement gap. And the only common theme, I went in looking for some kind of silver bullet, like, okay, we just do this and then we solve the achievement gap or something of that nature. What what stuck out to me, and the only common theme I came from it, was there were a lot of approaches, but every single principal or administrator that solved the achievement gap in a school where they shouldn't have been able to solve the achievement gap was that they did some serious work towards it, doing a lot of research on it, adding a whole bunch of extra specific programs just for their school needs. So I would say that the way you become an exemplary principal is the same way, I've tried to be an exemplary teacher, and that's by doing the extra. Last year at Berkshire, for example, I wanted to deal with school equity, and I put together a field trip called Berkshire Adventure Michigan, which it ended up being a ton of extra work on my part, but it was worth it in seeing these students that I was able to get scholarships from that usually wouldn't have gotten the opportunities they had to get opportunities to develop better as students. And one thing I'd like to do as an administrator, and this kind of follows this same kind of line of thinking, is myself and Dave Brooks, our new principal at Berkshire. I sat down with him to discuss a plan for what would be called the Administrators Lunch Club. Basically, it was meant to solve the problem that a lot of times administrators are spending a ton of time dishing out discipline to students that are kind of like the repeat offenders. So my idea was that we would take some of these chronically disciplined students and we would form a lunch club with them. This lunch club, they would meet with the principal that works with them once a week for lunch. All they would do basically is sit down, eat lunch, talk about life, but it would be a way for the principal to develop a relationship with these students to where when that principal gets that student in their office for disciplining, it's a little bit more powerful because a relationship's been set, and that student might actually feel like they're letting somebody down. Sometimes the parents don't have the best relationships with some of those students that are really struggling. So that was just an idea I had along this line of thinking. This is probably the most difficult question to answer in terms of challenges facing principals in public education. I mentioned discipline. Sometimes there's not a lot of perfect solutions in terms of student discipline. If it's too harsh, you run into a lot of problems. If it's too light, there's problems. Even with advanced strategies like restorative practices, you still run into some conundrums that are not exactly ideal. But I would say even greater than anything that a principal deals with during the school day is some of the things that they run into that are outside of their control. Issues like equity that lead to the achievement gap. And this is where I think an exemplary principal, can really do the extra things. When I studied in Ghana, I was amazed that their lunch program was overseen by somebody that had a degree in culinary science. As I've been walking around these schools in Finland, same thing. I've just been amazed at just how well the students are fed, but on top of that, they really make it a point of the school being somewhere where the student wants to be. And I think that's where a great leader can do the extra things in a school. You know, some of these work environments that our students are put in are not exactly ideal. It's a lot of classes of desks that aren't very comfortable for students. The the food that students are being fed is not exactly what you want those students to be eating. Um, Before we can educate these students effectively, we need to make sure we're taking care of their human needs to start with. I would say my greatest challenge in moving from a teacher to a principal would be experience. Um, I have served as our principal at Berkshire when we've had administrators out of the building before. And while I've read a lot of literature on leadership, read a lot of research journals and things of that such on being an effective principal. It does not exactly prepare you for some of the encounters you're going to have as a principal. I remember 15 minutes into my first day of filling in for Mr. Clinkscale at Berkshire, I had rec duty, and a student fell off the bleachers and fell in a certain way to where they bit almost all the way through their tongue. They were bleeding really bad. I mean, imagine the scene. These were sixth graders that thought this student was going to die. Um, well, I've read the literature on how to deal with situations like that. You don't really know how to deal with a situation like that until you've had a chance to encounter a situation like that. What I'm here studying in Finland is something called phenomenon based education. In short, they decided that just reading content and being force fed content wasn't effective for teachers, and that what they're changing to is a curriculum based around phenomenon. Their students, they'll go out and they'll do field experiences and they'll write down situations that the teacher dealt with, and then they'll use research and they'll brainstorm as a group to decide, what would be the best possible solutions in that situations, what would be drawbacks, things of that nature. And what I'm excited about for the Aspiring Principals Leadership Academy is that I'll have some of those opportunities. I'm going to be doing these field experiences where I can see some of the problems that are encountered by principals on a daily basis. But not only that, from these from these problems, I'll have a team of like-minded people that are in some of the same situations as I am, that are also very intelligent, that we can get together as a group and we can brainstorm solutions to really not only have these experiences, but to develop a meaningful understanding of how to address these situations. What areas do I need to most improve to become a successful principal? Well, I touched on the experience aspect of it. Um, I guess the biggest thing will be kind of this paradigm shift from being a highly effective teacher, but to start thinking about how to become a highly effective principal. And that's going to require a paradigm shift. Sometimes great teachers don't necessarily become great administrators, similar to how Michael Jordan's playing career as a basketball player did not mirror his ineffectiveness as a coach. You kind of think as a teacher in more of a micro way about, what can I do in the classroom? How can I make this classroom, caring and nurturing? How can I make each student learn individually just in this classroom? As a principal, you got to think more as like more in a macro way. Kind of, how am I going to build the environment for the whole school? How am I going to ensure that all students are learning in the most effective way possible? What do I got to do to empower teachers so they can teach these students in the most effective way possible so they're learning. Um, and I've been as a peer leader in groups like FAC that I've led and, our student improvement team. I feel I've been an effective leader at empowering other teachers. But the paradigm shift and the relationship shift, I'm going to have to be thinking differently as a principal. And the nice things about that is that as part of the Aspiring Principals Leadership Academy, I'm going to be with people that are dealing with this same situation. I I found it very meaningful this year just to sit down with David Brooks, our new principal at Berkshire, and just ask him because he's kind of gone through the same leadership journey as me. Just to kind of ask him, what's it like transitioning from a teacher to a principal? What what issues have you run into? I know every principal probably goes in with the mindset, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to make this the most effective school ever. We're not going to have any discipline issues. But sometimes that doesn't always work out because there's a lot of difficult situations you run into. And as part of the Aspiring Principals Leadership Academy, I'm just excited to work with people that are dealing with that same transition, but also leaders that have already gone through that transition and can lead us and kind of share with us some of the things we should be looking at in terms of leadership development that maybe we don't see as a problem right away, but that as leaders they have the experience to know that that is going to be an issue and that is something that we need to continue to grow to develop our leadership profile. How would my colleagues and administrators describe me as a leader? Well, I'll start by saying that they would say that I'm someone that's deeply passionate about teaching and learning and leadership. Also, they would describe me as a great listener. I remember when Dr. Neerad started with the district, and he mentioned that for the first year he was there, he was going to focus on just listening to the various groups to kind of understand how the district works and what kind of problems the district's facing. And I just thought that was very powerful. And as I observed other leaders, I noticed some of the same things that they weren't always the person that was constantly talking, but when they did speak, it had kind of a certain power to it because their other colleagues or administrators, they knew that they had listened and developed the most informed opinion. So when they were speaking, it had kind of that extra power to it. Um, I'd also say that they would say that I'm somebody that, when given a problem, I am very good at solving it. I will do the extra things to ensure that it is solved. Last year we had a serious problem with cleanliness at Berkshire, and as the chair of FAC, I remember I spoke with Joanna McKinney, our assistant principal, and she asked me, what is my vision for FAC? And I said, well, we have we have Ed Council that is already doing the specifics of school improvement. I want FAC to be the group that sets the environment where these school improvement goals can be accomplished. So our first big issue in FAC with school environment was school cleanliness. And specifically, our school was very dirty last year. Um, Classrooms weren't being cleaned up. We had a lot of issues with overuse of the building. Um, the custodial staff was severely understaffed. Um, so I did a number of things. I began by emailing some of the leaders within the district, within the custodial staff, and when I noted that that wasn't working, and some other proactive solutions like having students clean up and make their jobs easier by asking them what are the little things we can do at Berkshire that will make it possible that the understaffed custodial staff can clean up the classrooms in a way that creates an environment that is safe and clean and conducive to learning. After that also did not work, I wrote a very long email to the the leader of the custodial staff, and from that letter I actually got a visit from, it wasn't their CEO, but it was, the guy came from out of state, and he sat down and talked to me to hear my concerns. And I can say that after that day, conditions did improve with our cleaning staff in the building. And for the first time, the building was being cleaned at a level that my colleagues and other administrators were very happy with. And I can say that I was definitely I was definitely, I guess, the leader in that setting. The other thing I guess my coworkers would say is that I'm just somebody that they're happy to be in a group with, that they enjoy working with. Another group that I'm part of at Berkshire, the data team, the school improvement team. Sometimes it's not all that fun talking about data for 7 hours at Oakland schools like we do once a month. I try to be the person that lightens the mood, tries to crack a joke where necessary, or finds ways to kind of just make the day a lot more enjoyable, make people smile, and just be somebody that brings a positive dynamic to a group and makes, teaching, leadership, makes it an enjoyable experience for the people that I'm around. I guess the biggest thing I can add is that I never really thought I would be here. My grandfather was illiterate. My father didn't graduate high school. I was expected to carry on the family tradition of being a third generation race car driver. My grandfather started this, and then my father was the 1978 mini stock champion at Flat Rock Motor Speedway. And it was expected that I would also be a race car driver. Um, Much of my academic career, I was largely, not necessarily a failure, but I was definitely a below average student. I often encourage students' parents that have behavior issues that, their student probably behavior behaves better than I did at that age, and things worked out for me. So I'm pretty certain that they can overcome it as well. Um, but being in these situations where I've been a failure as a student, when I began teaching, I can honestly say I wasn't a great teacher. But understanding the difficulties that people in these situations face of being a poor student, of being a poor teacher. I even got the opportunity to be a bad bus driver when I was teaching in North Carolina. But from these experiences, I feel I've learned a certain amount of empathy, and I really believe that empathy is something that you can't read about, you can't get from just viewing. It's something you have to experience firsthand. And I've built a strong degree of empathy, but also humility to understand the situations that people are facing and just how complex and how difficult they are. But also at the same time, how absolutely critical that there's somebody there that helps them overcome these difficulties so they can go on to have an enhanced life and be a better student or be a better teacher. Um, I can also promise that I never take any opportunity for granted. I would be unbelievably proud to be Birmingham's representative in the Aspiring Principals Leadership Academy, and I will guarantee that I will get the most out of the experience. Um, I guess I would ask some questions, but I don't think I'm going to get a lot of answers in this empty room I'm in right here. So, yeah, I'll skip on the question answering part. And I just want to say thanks once again for this interview opportunity. Um, it was different for me as well. I hope the process wasn't too bad for you, and just thanks again. Finland has been outstanding so far. I've viewed some things that have really got my mind working, and just thanks again, and hope you enjoy this video.